I want to welcome you to our conversation, community conversation here at the city of Richfield. We're excited about this Black History Month celebration 2021, and we're going to get started. Ace Race, Then and Now conversation series with City of Richfield and our guests. I'm Bill Green, recent new Equity and Inclusion Administrator. Let's start this off with, again, with the origins of the history and of Black History Month celebration. Carter G. Woodson, who's noted as the father of Black history, began the celebration of Negro History Week. He chose the second week of February to honor the birth of Frederick Douglass and Abraham Lincoln. It was in 1976 that the celebration actually expanded to an entire month of January. Here's a quote that Dr. Carter shared back then, and it gives us impetus for what we're going to be looking at today. Here's a quote. It says, "And we should emphasize not Negro history, but the Negro in history. What we need is not a history of select race or nation, but the history of the world, void of national bias, race, hate, and religious prejudice. There should be no indulgence in undue eulogy of the Negro. The case of the Negro is well taken care of when it is shown how he has far influenced the development of civilization." Dr. Carter G. Woodson. And that really does speak to the heart of, again, why we are celebrating this month of Black history. So people can know really more about who we really are, and so we can better understand our role as we see it in society. Then Dr. Carter G. Woodson sought to give greater recognition to the prominence of the African American experience in America and the world. Dr. Woodson, along with W.B. Du Bois and noted Black scholars and leaders, sought to appreciate, celebrate, and educate America and the world about its reality, the truth, and the miseducation of Blacks and Negroes. The quote is a reference from Dr. Woodson's renowned book, The Miseducation of the Negro. The book was an important scholarship addressing race, racism, hatred, and systemic injustice of Blacks and Negroes. The book sought to educate all about the unique role of Blacks and Negroes played in the development of a democratic republic called the United States. Wow. So again, that's the basis for our conversation today, and the theme, how we're going to ace race. We're going to appreciate, celebrate, and educate. And as it was then, but now, 2021, we have this moment in our history to appreciate, celebrate, and educate our community, nation, and world about the African American experience. On behalf of the Richfield Administration Office of Equity and Inclusion, we invite and encourage all to ace race and the African American experience. Take a moment to learn, lead, and support to do community through our great diversity. With that said, I'd like for us again to have a conversation with some of our community. And today our guest is Brandon Clayton. Brandon Clayton will give you a little background on himself, and then we'll answer some questions. So Brandon, welcome again to the conversation. Why don't you tell us a little about you, and then we'll have some questions and conversation.
Sounds good. Thank you for having me. Again, my name is Brandon Clayton. I am originally from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Been living in Minnesota for about 10 years now. When I came up here for 11 years now, actually. Time flies. But for my undergrad at the University of Minnesota, where I majored in business and marketing education. And then I ended up sticking around, ended up getting my master's degree in strategic communication management from Concordia University. And since then, just been kind of working in the corporate spaces, doing a number of different contracts for marketing related, opportunities, whether that was in healthcare at Health Partners or United Healthcare or some of the other companies, or working in, most recently I worked in finance, well, doing marketing, but at Ameriprise. I was there for a year and some change. And then now I kind of work, I do my own, I like working at Ameriprise kind of developed my passion for finance, and I've started to do trading, and it's turned out to be lucrative. So I've just been doing that for now, and just been, but yeah, that's kind of my background.
Okay. Well, good, man. I'm glad to see you again. You're navigating, making it happen. And that's one of the beauties of, again, being able to establish yourself with a solid educational, background. You've got your undergrad and your master's, and it creates all kinds of opportunities. So great to hear that. You're making it happen. Well, let's answer some of these questions and give our community a little perspective on your experience about being an African American. What African American has influenced or inspired you?
I think my influences have spanned across like the different stages of life that I've been in. So, starting out, your first influences are the people closest to you. So, starting out, it was my mom, it was my grandmother, it was my grandfather, but well, both of them, and they all had different impacts on me. My grandfather, I remember having conversations with him all the time, and for whatever reason, he hear me talk about whatever my dreams were, and I was always a dreamer. So, different outlandish about being a soccer player or developing roller coasters or firefight, like it was just a whole bunch of dreams. He never told me anything more ridiculous, but he always just let me talk and let me speak and let me dream. And so that one of my kind of inspired me to be who I am today. But then in school you learn about Martin Luther King, you learn you don't necessarily learn about Malcolm X in school very much, but you learn about them, you learn about Rosa Parks, and so those became influences as well. And then once I played the saxophone, so then once I kind of started getting into the saxophone more and more and got into jazz, then my influences were like Dexter Gordon and Charlie Parker, John Coltrane, listening to them, trying to develop my sound. And then as I started to get more into political matters, influences of Barack Obama, like individual. So as I continue to progress, my influences continue to change on what I'm trying to get into.
Wow. Man, great for sharing that again, and that whole journey. Again, I can understand that. And I have a similar narrative about, again, how the African American community has helped me in my development along those early years, and again, moving years of discipline once to college and those things. That's very good. Well, our next question, similar, but again, a little different. It said, what aspect of the African American culture has impacted you?
I'm pretty, being an African American, I'm pretty immersed into the culture itself. So, whether that's the food and environment that we grow up around, surrounding food, like Thanksgiving or Christmas, and just being at we didn't call her Big Mama, but Big Mama's house, coming together and hanging out with your cousins and your family, and just that whole experience. To music and growing up in the Black church. So, we're both growing up in that church and having that experience of all night revivals and, listening to the music and having that feeling that you can't really explain. That the culture really impacts me. Then, again, I play jazz. So hearing that music and that soul and that feeling, the feeling you get when you're a certain singer, Sarah Vaughan, or any of those singers, or the players, anybody, and hearing the amount of passion and desperation in some cases, joy in some cases that they put into that music, it's hugely impactful, and it impacts the world really. A lot of different aspects of our African American sound is found in a bunch of different varieties of music. And you have a whole lot of other churches where traditionally the Black church was the church that had the cymbals, the drums, the organ, and all these other things. Guitar, different sounds. Now, a lot of other churches are including that into their worship experience as well. So it's just amazing to see, as you grow older and more knowledgeable, the impact that our culture has on the rest of the world.
Wow. Man, you cover a lot of good things there. I was thinking as you were talking, some of this similar, my aspect. One thing that's stood out, I think, to be good for the community, to something that people don't realize, you talked about the Black church. Yeah, historically, the Black church had a phenomenal influence on the African American community. One of the things that caught me a little statistic, I heard one day that of the various ethnic groups, actually the African American attends church more than anybody. and,
I can believe
and you
that.
can see why. Yeah.
Yeah.
Monday, Sunday, Tuesday, Wednesday. So people be surprised that, given sometimes the disparities that we hear about, other things, but we're one of the most church faith group among ethnic groups around. So yeah, they said, I think the statistics said of the groups, we spend more time in church than most groups. Yeah. So that's good perspective.
Yeah.
Appreciate that. Appreciate that. Let's move on. Another here. I think you might touch this. If not, we'll go to the other. It said, what has been your experience? And you kind of hit on it in the African American community, earliest to now. I don't know if you want to add anything to that. Anything earlier now? You kind of gave that journey, from family and those things. I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that.
I guess now, growing up, I kind of grew up where I was raised in the city of Milwaukee.
Mhm.
You know about Milwaukee, it's one of the blackest cities in the country, but
Mhm.
I went to school in the suburbs. So my
Okay.
learned experiences were around, mostly predominantly white individuals, which was cool. I enjoyed it, and I still am
Yeah.
friends with most of the people I went to school with. But nowadays, I find myself engaging with more people, African Americans, whether it's through
Mhm.
the college, and I got to engage with a lot of individuals who were like-minded, such as myself,
Right.
and so we've come together, and now we'll hang out on the weekends. We'll talk about business. We'll talk about
Okay.
stock.
Right.
And so that's been a interesting experience. And it's been
Wow.
because, growing up, you hear about overcoming the teen pregnancy thing. And, there was this
Mhm.
big stigma about teen pregnancy. Well,
Mhm.
people I know don't have kids. So it's like, where was this? I don't know if maybe we were just all determined to be it or something, but a lot of the people that I know that I hang around, most of us don't have kids and, are
Mhm.
pursuing
Okay.
our lives and trying to, better ourselves. And so it's been a really good experience to be around and kind of just seeing us all, trump those negative statistics that we've heard about our whole lives.
Mm. Oh, wow. Yeah. Again, thanks, kind of sharing that journey. Like you say, as I really appreciate you sharing that, because some people don't realize as an African American, we get sometimes exposed to various communities
Mhm.
and at different levels. And I've shared, again, I went to predominantly Black, mostly, growing up all the way. But then I've heard the story of those growing up and going to predominantly white schools.
Mhm.
Different kind of give different perspective, and they have a little different perspective on how they see things. So I can appreciate you sharing that insight.
Mhm.
Moving on here, last got two more questions here. Uh, and again, you may have this similar, and this is what is your knowledge of the African American experience in the US and in the world? Kind of a little different shift there. But what is
Mhm.
your knowledge and how do you see that? How do you see us and maybe how others see us in the US and the world? What has been your take on that, those lenses?
I think, my knowledge base might be, I think if you're Black, you have to have some knowledge of like the experience here in the United States, especially live it every day. Um,
Yeah.
but I'm kind of a student of history, so to speak, just because I like to try to understand um, what has, why are things the way that they are?
Right.
What
Hmm.
has caused us to go from, then to now, or why were we then in the first place? So I like to try to understand. And so over the years, I've just learned slavery, learned about, the segregation period, learned about Jim Crow, learned redlining,
Hmm.
learn about so many systemic racism and how a black sounding application with a black sounding name is more likely to be rejected than an
Mm, mhm.
and that's still to this day, and so it's like just learn so many things over the time period, and so you kind of understand um, what you're up against, and I think that that's been the key for me in my formation of how I want to try to help our people
Mhm.
in society in general. Is just being able to understand like what are we actually up against and why
Right.
we find ourselves in these constant pitfalls, and
Mm,
what we do to overcome those. And I don't know, so that's kind of been my experience, is just like being intentional about learning,
mhm.
um in addition to my own lived experience of just being Black and American, the things
Yeah.
that I have to be
Mhm.
cognizant of as I go to and fro, um so that I don't find myself in another hashtag or in a compromising situation.
Right. Yeah. Well, again, as you can highlight again, there's a real sense of the struggle, uh, which you've noted again, both recently and in the past, dealing with the issues of race and racism. Very, very much a U.S. as well as a worldview that the African American has had to deal with. And other kind of side of that is again the accolades that have come, with like you mentioned earlier, with music, with many other entertainment disciplines, having the first Black president,
Hmm.
uh, all those things become, new filters and new lens for many of us. And so that's been another important piece. So appreciate that. Last question. What is your message to the African American community and the world for our 2021 Black History? What would be your message?
Uh, so I guess kind of touching on what you just said, you mentioned how Obama became our first Black president,
Mhm.
and it kind of reminded me of the story that somebody talked about where prior to, I forget who was the first person to do it, but running a mile under 4 minutes was like impossible.
Jim Ryan. Yep.
Yeah. People just assumed that it was impossible and it
Mm,
wasn't something that they could do. And
mhm.
then the day, or weeks after he broke that, a whole bunch of people just started breaking. You know, like
Wow.
uh, like right after he broke the 4 minute mile, now because
Yeah.
it became a possibility, and
Yeah.
so now all of a sudden, they're just people are just breaking that 4 minute mile left and right. And I think that's why Black history is important, because we are not being taught these things, and our the contributions we've made to society in general in school, for whatever reason, because Black history is American history, because we
Mm,
contributed so much, but for whatever reason we're not being taught it. And so but once you start to learn it and you start to see what we've really contributed to our society, you start to learn like,
mhm.
wow, possible for me, like after Obama
It
became
does.
elected,
Yeah.
it showed the possibilities that we have. And so now you see so many more people going into public offices,
Yeah.
so many people trying to pursue different avenues, and when you start to see more Black judges, now all of a sudden you see a whole lot more Black judges. You start to see
Mhm.
people doing writing movies and whatnot, like what's his name, Coogler,
Mhm.
right? Now you're seeing
Yeah.
a whole lot of writers doing that. So like once you kind of break open those possibilities, now people are start rushing in. And so I think one of my messages is to look and see what are the possibilities, and study and see like, yo, we've really
Yeah.
done a whole lot of things here that have not necessarily been taught to us for one reason or another. And just realize what you are really capable of if you really put yourself forward. And then the other thing is, to the Black community, and specifically, we have to realize that we're in this battle together. We're all in this
Mhm.
battle, but specifically the
Right.
Black community, we're
Yeah.
in this battle together, and we have to know what we're up against, and we're not up against each other.
Right.
So we have to unite and understand like our common enemy isn't each other, but it's the systematic things that have been put as barriers to us.
Right. Right. Yeah.
When it comes down to the war on drugs that remove men from the home and caused a lot of the division and hatred amongst ourselves that we currently experience. That was something that was done that has had trickle down trauma experiences, and
Right.
so once we start to understand that and really like heal and acknowledge our role, accountability, all those things, we can start to move forward as a unit and then as a culture and as a nation together. But
Okay. All right.
acknowledging, and taking accountability and start saying, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
and please forgive me. And, and working together, we're going to continue to run into these pitfalls. But yeah, I guess to sum it up, become a student of history, understand what we've done and what the true ceiling is for us, which I don't think there is a ceiling, but, continue to try and break through and find inspirations out there, and then heal and be accountable and grow and work together.
Well, I think you captured those really the sentiments of many of our young folks today, and I really appreciate you giving that perspective. Again, I just in summary, kind of like keep the faith and continue to dream.
Mm-hmm.
Keep the faith and continue to dream, and I would echo that as well. Wow. Well, we're going to get ready to try to bring this to close. We want to try to keep it around 30 minutes. What I want to say, thanks again, but also for those joining us, Brandon's going to be bringing us a couple numbers here in the saxophone. just before we leave, I want to give you these final remarks from Dr. Carter G. Woodson as well. He said, we have a wonderful history behind us, kind of what you said here. If you are unable to demonstrate to the world that you have this record, the world will say to you, you are not worthy to enjoy the blessings of democracy or anything else. And so, as you said, we must continue to believe in each other and the faith and to continue to dream. So appreciate you, man.